Let's get into the Colorado. And again, this has to do with expectation. Here's Dion.
If you can't see what's coming with CU football, you've lost your mind. You're just a flat-out hater. If you can't see what's going on and what's going to transpire over the next several months, something's wrong with you.
This man is an ultimate competitor, and after a 48-41 loss in which they made a ton of mistakes, he didn't roll in there and lament the mistakes. He talked about, look at how bright our future is. Why? Expectations. Expectations have to be the lens with which we evaluate everything that we saw on Saturday. It's why the USC take is the way that it is. It's why there's a disappointment to Saturday, even in a 48-41 win. It's why when you look at Colorado, you say to yourself, man, they've got something. Yeah, this is absolutely a team that can go to a bowl. Man, they are recruiting some really good young talent. Look at what Cormani McClain did. Look at what Omarion Miller did. There were more positives in a loss. And let's face it, it's probably because of which half the positives happened in versus the negatives happened in. If Colorado would have played a great first half and then a poor second half and then lost going away and USC comes back, we're probably thinking to ourselves like, man, I don't know if Colorado's going to make a bowl game. But because of the way this all played out, because of our expectation of what Colorado is and what they can be during the course of the season, all of a sudden the narrative after that loss to USC, back-to-back losses, by the way, is incredibly positive. Colorado trailed by 27 with 2 minutes left in the third quarter. 2 minutes left in the third quarter. Think about that. 41-14. This is, again, where that philosophy for USC comes in. But they didn't. And they left time, and then Colorado capitalized. And they capitalized in a few different ways. Gus kept asking me about the structure of the defense, and the structure of the defense was not all that different. They didn't change a lot of the schematics of what they were doing in the first half and what they were doing in the second half. I thought what was different was the effort, which from the front seven in particular was really good from the defensive line. And they changed some personnel, and then the effort increased. Cormani McClain goes in the game. He was much better on the outside than what they had in the first half. All of a sudden, you've got guys being disciplined, making plays. I believe that they were challenged at halftime. I really believe this. Urban Meyer put it perfectly on our halftime show during the course of the game. And he said, if I'm Colorado, I'm rolling in there as the head coach and breaking something because we're better than this and we can play with that team. It was the mistakes. It was the blocked punt. It was the interception. It's two short fields. He would be frustrated because it's like, listen, we gave them this huge lead, 34-14 at the half. I believe that that's what happened because when they came back out, they were playing so much different. And it wasn't because of changes. It wasn't because of adjustments. I thought that the game plan overall offensively was better this week than it was last week against Oregon for Colorado. But mostly it was challenging these individuals to go win their individual matchup. And I think these players responded. By the way, they were incredibly shorthanded. And I don't want to dismiss that on the USC side either. Zachariah Branch not being on the field was a giant deal for USC. Giant. There's nobody on the Colorado roster, maybe Travis Hunter, that could match up with Zachariah Branch. Maybe Travis Hunter. But Branch's absence was felt, even though they scored 48 points. Now, having said that, Colorado had nobody out there. 3 starters out in the secondary. They had their best player on offense and defense out of the game. Imagine that. If you're USC, imagine having your best offensive player and your best defensive player out. Like, let's say it's Zachariah Branch and it's Bear Alexander or Mason Cobb or Bullock. Like, imagine that, right? Like, that's all anyone would be talking about, and rightly so. Well, that's what Colorado is dealing with without Travis Hunter on the field. He's their best offensive player. He's their best defensive player. They also had Shiloh Sanders out. They also had Miles Slusher out. So you're down 3 guys in the secondary, and they looked like it in the first half. They were slow. They were lost. They were missing tackles. They weren't winning. In the second half, they insert Cormani McClain. He starts locking it down on one side of the field, and then they were more disciplined in their coverage. There were a lot of times where they were forcing Caleb to be a runner rather than allowing him to find an open receiver once he broke contain out of the pocket. If I were an opposing defense, that's what I would force him to do, because you're going to die a really quick death if you're going to come off of the wide receivers once Caleb breaks the pocket, and then he's going to find them and he's going to create a huge play and a quick strike play. And you saw that in the first half. In the second half, they weren't doing that. They were basically like, fine, leave the pocket, and guess what? Run for 8, run for 9. Go ahead. What we're not going to allow you to do is find an open receiver down there. And he got frustrated and forced the ball and turned it over. His first turnover of the season. That's what was different with Colorado. And that's why I think that there's a lot of excitement moving forward. As they were shorthanded, now all of a sudden you can see a scenario where Cormani McClain is playing at one corner position and Travis Hunter is playing on the other corner position. And now all of a sudden you're like, oh man, like this is really good. By the way, on the offensive side, they also found another threat at wide receiver in Omarion Miller. This guy was outstanding. Outstanding. 7 catches for 196 yards and a touchdown, all in the second half. Again, challenging their guys. Who's going to go out there and win? And these guys did, even young players. And that's why Deion was excited. That's why he was upbeat after the game, even in a loss. Again, let's talk about expectations. That's how we view these two teams. If I was going to critique Colorado, though, my critique of Colorado would be the obvious mistakes in the first half, which can't happen. You can't have a punt blocked, in particular when it's just a punter rolling out and taking too long. Shedeur gave them a short field. I thought that they were, tackling poorly, to say the least, getting out of their assignment on defense in the first half. There were just too many missed assignments and mistakes in the first half. Too many. And that led to them having to make this giant comeback. And then once they were making that comeback, I felt like there were some situational things, because once you're having to make that comeback, you've got to play perfect. And Shedeur came close to playing perfect. There's no way that they're in that game. There's no way unless they have Shedeur Sanders. He is one of the best players in college football. He's one of the best quarterbacks in college football. His touch, his accuracy, he's tremendous. I love watching him play. We've gotten to do it 3 times now. I thought that his calmness and his ability to find throws and then make those throws were huge. His ability to run and hurt the defense with his legs, and more so his willingness to do that, was huge in this game. It's what I believe made Colorado believe that they could go out there in the second half and actually make this a game, is because they had number 2. And if you're in the locker room, you have number 2, and guess what? You can go out there and compete even when you go down 41-14. Now, having said that, the margin of error for him is so small because of how perfect he has to play, in particular after he's down. So the mistakes came in game situational awareness. The clock management at the end wasn't where it needed to be. That's obvious. And by the way, he took the blame for that. I was all over Sean Lewis on the broadcast, and rightly so. And then Shedeur said, hey, I was checking the plays. And by the way, that can't happen. They got the ball with like a little under 6 minutes, I believe. And at that point, they have to think to themselves, we have to score as quickly as we can so that we can have the option to not onside kick, have a timeout left, and have our defense get off the field. That has to be the goal of that series. And they were so that series then has to be hyperspeed. You don't audible in a 2-minute situation. You just don't. You call the play and you go. Maybe you'll change a protection. Maybe you'll signal a route differently on the outside, but you're not changing whole plays, and you surely aren't changing to run plays that are just A-gap dive plays in a 2-minute situation. So the failure comes in here in 2 parts. One is from a coaching staff You've got to tell your team and your quarterback that it is a 2-minute situation, and then all the rules in a 2-minute situation apply. I'm not changing the play. We're going hyper fast. That's number one. Number two, even if you're not running your 2-minute offense as a quarterback, you've got to know that you can't change the play and you can't take that long. You just can't. They can't run the ball in the A gap on basically a dive play. Felt like 4 times on that series. They took forever. And at that point, you're in a coin flip or worse on an onside kick. Much worse, actually. Much worse. That's situational failure. Comes from the quarterback and the coaching staff. So those are the areas that they have to get better moving forward in order to capitalize on this good feel that they have even in a loss. They've got Arizona State. They've got Stanford in a Friday night home game. Then they've got a bye. They've got some tough opponents down the stretch. UCLA, Oregon State. Then they've got a winnable Arizona game. Then they got Washington State on a Friday night road game. Woof. And Utah. That's really difficult. Do they have a path to 6? Absolutely. I think Arizona State becomes the pivotal game. I believe Colorado is better than both Arizona and Stanford. Arizona State is likely a win, but they have to go on the road. And we see how difficult it is to go on the road. People just don't play their best. We saw that with Utah and Oregon State this last week on a Friday night. So in order for Colorado to get a bowl game, this is the pivotal game. The other ones are going to be really difficult. At UCLA, I don't know. Oregon State might be just too good at the line of scrimmage. Washington State, in particular, there on a Friday night, I don't know. And Salt Lake, Utah is one of the toughest places to play in the country. So that's going to be really difficult. They got to be better in those situations, and maybe they could have come back.